That's absolutely impossible.
I didn't
It is
intend to
impossible.
put you
Yes,
there.
yes. No, first of all, I'm happy to see all of you, and I think it's. I'm an optimist by nature, but I am. Although we are in sometimes, no, not sometimes, quite in gloomy situations, I think there's a lot of reasons for optimism, and let me start with that. Yes, good. But first of all, you know, the global progressive mobilization, it's good to start with that. This is an initiative that started with Pedro Sanchez and the Spanish socialists. And it's very important that we have a close look at it. Of course, it's also about networking, meeting up, but this is in essence reconnecting with the DNA of social democracy. We always have been internationalists. You know, we are the internationalists. We are the ones who say, look, there are borders and member states and nation states, but overall, what unites us is social democracy, progressive thoughts, and with that comes multilateralism, democracy, and all these very important values. But we did forget to work on that the last couple of, it's for decades, right. And it's for historians to put that in the right perspective, but we know that we haven't been working on that at all. There is the Socialist International, there are other organizations, they do not function anymore as they should. So this is a starting point of the rebuilding that, and I hope everybody's really convinced of that. That means that we need to put energy, money, means into that process. Otherwise, we will not succeed, and we're not succeeding. Huh? And you all talked about the far right and the threat of far right. And let me start by saying I'm from Belgium. You know, Belgium, small country, one of the founding fathers of Europe. But the Flemish part of Flanders, where I'm from, has been faced with far right for 30 years now. So it's lesser known, everybody knows the situation in France, but it's quite comparable to France in the sense that we have for a very long time extreme right in the center of our political system. By the way, just as a side note, they never ever gained power in Belgium because we installed and invented the cordon sanitaire. And it's not always nice, but it works. Okay, that's a side note. But important, because if you let extreme right come to power, either by coalition or like, I'll come back to Hungary a little bit later on, but like in Hungary, then you know what will happen. Not only your social system, but also women's rights, also everything that relates to democracy, everything will be torn down. The far right, and that's new, I see that also in my country, the far right always has had a fascistic, anti-immigration, discriminatory discourse. But they were on themselves, operating in France, in the Netherlands, in the Western Balkans. They united, and they did what we lacked to do the last couple of decades. They started unifying. And if you look to what Trump is doing, it's textbook Orban. But then instead of taking 16 years for that, he's taking only a few years for that. First term and now in the second term, full-fledged ahead. And important for us, but we know, but important for us to always take into account the agenda of Trump is the exact same agenda as of Putin and the exact same agenda of Orban, Vucic, and other same. And that's also something that we have to work on and build counter-narratives on is very important. So that brings me to multilateralism. Romina, you said multilateralism is over. Right. I do not believe that. I think multilateralism, as we have known it, might be over in the sense that we need to reinvent that. Multilateralism is excellent. We established that, by the way. It was mainly the United States who pushed after the Second World War to go into a multilateral world. But it always has been, of course, imperfect. If the global south or upcoming economies and states like India do not have the place they deserve in multilateralism, then they will go against it. So we have to reinvent it, but I think we need to be optimistic that we will keep it, we'll keep the multilateral system. But it will only happen if we organize ourselves and if we take that partnerships around the world. And that is what is happening now. And I have to say, I have a lot of critics often on how Europe operates, especially when it comes to Gaza and the Middle East. But when it comes to establishing new partnerships, we are advancing. I was recently in India. We have a free trade agreement with India. And if you would have asked me a year and a half ago, is it possible to have a free trade agreement with India? I would have said, no, of course not with India. You know, that country is extremely protectionistic. It's not capable of doing that, and it happened. We can reshape that. Of course, it also happened because India was faced with the crazy Trump administration and a lot of problems with China. When I was there, and I literally said, for us, Europe is a beacon of trust and reliability. And that is what we have to keep on working to reinvent that multilateral system. And that brings me to enlargement. But because how can you work on new partnerships and not enlarge? It's part of that new way forward. And I have to say, when you said about the Danish ambassador, it doesn't surprise me, I have to say, but it also annoys me. It really annoys me. But it's true, eh? Geopolitics is helping us to get more people on board to do what they do. But I expect from a socialist government in Denmark that they support from the start enlargement. Because we do not, of course it will, let's hope it will make it easier to do the enlargement process now because of the geopolitics. Let's use it, let's not waste time. But we, Social Democrats, and we lacked also the energy and the courage to do so, but we Social Democrats, when I talk of DNA, enlargement is part of that DNA because it's that internationalism, it's the fact that you broaden the European Union, you take more people on board, the socio-economics. We are here in Spain, you look, it's a wonderful city, but you also see a very prosperous city. You go to Madrid, you go to Sevilla, more in the south, you see a country that is advancing. Yeah? You see the progress happening here. By the way, when I was in India, I also saw a lot of progress. And one of the reasons, no, maybe the main reason, is that I'm part of that big European Union. The European Union's success is not just the market, it's the fact that we all do our economies together, and we still have a long way to integrate, and it's far from perfect, but it is the creation of our wealth, and that creation of our wealth is the basis of our social security, and so on and so on. So that is what we have to do. And it's, we have the Willy Brandt program, and if you want more, I can give you more, but I'm going to stop after a few more sentences because we need to take questions. But I think it's important that you know that we work in the S&D group really very intensively on the enlargement process, and we're now in the middle of discussing how can we make sure that we succeed in the coming years with the first, and then with Ukraine, and I haven't talked about Serbia, but we will talk about Serbia later. Of course, the basis of all of that is that we cannot compromise. We cannot compromise on the fundamentals. And Dragan, he knows that very well, and I don't think you want to move in that direction. But it still also remains the basis of that enlargement process. Final point that I would want to make on that is that we as S&D today in the European Parliament, but also with our broad family, we have a huge task ahead of us. And we might think the most difficult part is the chapters and the process and what flexibility do we need. And I think the major task that we have is to convince our public opinion that this is a positive way forward, because you cannot go against your public opinion. And there we still have a long way to go. And I still have to say something about Serbia, because I learned to love the country in the last, I just started working on enlargement in the S&D 2 years ago. But I think Serbia really conquered my heart in the sense that if you see what is happening over there, the students, the protest, but also the professors, the process, and that is what we need to support. And you see what happened Saturday, Sunday in Hungary. That should give us so much optimism, because even after 16 years, after almost no leftovers, all the people in Hungary that I spoke said, look, if Orban wins, it's the full-fledged end of democracy, without any media freedom anymore, no independent judiciary, and so on and so on. And non-stop foreign interference and brainwashing of people, non-stop, and still they, with more than 50% and with a two-thirds majority now in the parliament, change, and it will change. You will see the change in your countries in the next coming weeks, months, and years, and that is the basis of a lot of hope in front of us. Well, thank you very much.